This is Heritage Words, a podcast about the words we've inherited from our ancestors and the meaning they bring to our lives. Heritage Words is produced by the HUC Jewish Language Project, which raises awareness about Jewish ancestral diversity through the lens of language. I'm your host, Sarah Bunin Benor. Our guest today is Aliza Bulow. Aliza is the visionary and CEO of CORE.org, an international organization that develops and supports frum women in Jewish communal roles. Frum means religious or Orthodox. After seminary in Israel, serving in the IDF and visiting refuseniks in Russia, Aliza graduated from Hunter College. While raising her family, she grew from Torah educator to director of Ner LeElef's North American Women's Program, traveling widely to coach Rebbitzins and guide outreach couples. For over 40 years, Aliza has mentored leaders and strengthened communities in more than 50 cities across 5 continents. I first connected with Aliza around surveys that I conducted in 2008 and 2019, and my book, Becoming Frum, which was published in 2012. Aliza also created a Yinglish dictionary documenting the language of Orthodoxy. We brought her to our podcast to talk about her experience converting to Judaism and learning the language of her new communities. Aliza, welcome to Heritage Words.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you. I've admired your work from afar for a long time, so I'm thrilled to be in this conversation.
Thank you. That's very nice. So let's start with your names. Tell us about your names and what they mean to you.
My names. Well, I'm Aliza Shoshana Bulow. It means a lot.
Oh my gosh, Aliza Shoshana is the exact name of my daughter. That's amazing.
Oh. So my English name is Alisa Ann. And Aliza is actually named after my mother and grandmother. My mother is Orally, and my grandmother is Elsa. So the Ali and the Sa of the end of their names makes Alisa. And then Ann is my mother's middle name also. So Aliza Ann in that. And then when I chose to be Jewish, the question is, what names would I choose? I loved Shoshana. I had a friend that was not Jewish that loved that name. And it's the first time I heard it. I didn't know what it meant, but I loved the name. And Aliza seemed to be an easy transition from Alisa. And really, I wanted a long name. My first choice was Aliza Shoshana Davida. And that was based on some childhood Catholic friends that had these long names. And I thought it was just so fun. So I chose all 3, and I converted twice, once conservative and once Orthodox. So in my conservative conversion, when I had just turned 16, it was Aliza Shoshana Davida, Bat Avraham Avinu. What a nice long name. And then when I converted in Israel a second time by the chief rabbinate, it was a Gior L'Chumra, just in case, let's make it sure, double dip. So when I said my name, they just repeated it, and her name shall be called in Israel Aliza Shoshana. And they dropped the Davida. And I didn't feel like I could correct them, that my name actually includes that. And I felt like probably David is a little stranger name, not as usual now that I had been in Israel for a while. I said, I'll just stick with the Aliza Shoshana. But Aliza does mean joy. And it's a specific type of joy. It's a spiritual type of joy and resilience. And I did ask a rabbi one time, we have a tradition that names are given by their parents with Ruach HaKodesh, with the Holy Spirit, thinking through the name. And I asked if that's the case for converts also, when they choose their name, do they get Ruach HaKodesh in naming themselves? And he looked into it and felt that, yes, it's true. And I do feel like Aliza Shoshana has been a Ruach HaKodesh name. Certainly the Aliza part, the joy and the resilience, has really undergirded my life, both as an internal posture and as something to drive towards. So those are my names. And Bulow I love because my maiden name is Beach, which did not work out so well in Israel, because with an Israeli accent, people would say, oh, beach, that's not a nice word in English. I'm like, no, beach.
So Bulow was your husband's name that you took when you got married?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. So where were your ancestors from, and when did they arrive in the U.S.?
My ancestors were largely from England, and that branch came in 1638 from England. The widow Jane Brocklebank and her young son Samuel were on the boat together, and they landed in Raleigh, Massachusetts. And Samuel grew up to be a captain in the Raleigh militia, and was actually scalped by Indians in the in a war, in the King Philip's War. Yeah. So
Oh my gosh, how do you know that?
buried in a mass grave in Sudbury, Massachusetts, which I visited, and it has all the names of the Raleigh militia there, who was scalped and who's buried there, right? So that is like something crazy about the non-Jews, and in this case, the Protestants, where they have a history and it's documented. I have it documented. I know who was on that boat. I know who her son was. I know how he grew up. So, and I know all the generations from there. I can't remember them all, but I have a book that has them all listed. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. So what I've been asking other guests about their heritage words, their immigrations were more recent than 1638. So I'll ask you, do you have any words that you inherited from your parents or grandparents that were different from those of your friends?
I don't think so. I don't know where the word kibibble comes from, if that's just a family word, or if that's a word my father picked up along the way. But I know that's a family word. There's just too much kibibble, which means it's just too busy. There's too many people there. There's too much going on. Like he'd much rather visit one-on-one than come for one of the kids' bar mitzvahs because there's too much kibibble around a bar mitzvah. So I
Okay.
don't know. I don't know if that's a word or not.
I have heard that, or ishkabibble, I've heard from other people as kind of a nonsense word. But I like that, kabibble. So let's turn to your Jewish background, your conversion process. Can you tell us briefly about that?
Extremely briefly. I became atheist at around 10 or 11, rejected what my parents were lightly trying to share with me and whatever the church was more significantly trying to share. And then went on a little journey trying to find purpose and meaning outside of religion. And then I sort of had a God experience when I was 14 and decided I should re-explore the God concept outside of the Christian paradigm. And then maybe even within it. So I was a freshman in high school, and I just went to the bookshelf and read across the bookshelf all the different religions that they had in that school. And when I landed on a book to be a Jew, I realized I'm Jewish. This is it. This is where I want to be. I just had to meet Jews after that. I had met Jews in my life, but I didn't know any at the time. But I knew after reading that book that I wanted to be Jewish. And so began my journey into Judaism. And I'm still in it and I love it.
Amazing. So as you converted, you said originally conservative and then Orthodox after spending some time in Israel. Tell us about the process of learning the language that you encountered.
Yes. So I really started off in a conservative synagogue in the late 1970s in Portland, Oregon. I started learning words there with Rabbi Joshua Stamfer, Alav Shalom, and through that conservative congregation. And then I went to Israel shortly thereafter. That was 10th grade that I actually converted, 9th grade when I met him. And then I went to summer camp, Camp Solomon Schechter. So I learned through that just a little bit. And then I went to Israel and I studied in Bravender's Michael Bruria in 1980. So that would have been my junior year in high school, and I converted then. So twice in 1 year I converted. So it was really very early. But the language, just the language. And I remember arriving at Bravender's, really feeling so out of my depth, so excited to be in Israel at 16, so excited to be on my own and learning my dream. And then I was in conversation in the very beginning, realizing I'm so out of my depth. All these girls are so much older than me and so much more knowledgeable with so much background. And somebody mentioned the word Baal Tshuva. I had never heard that word before. And I said, what is that? And she said, well, if you don't know what that is, you probably are one. And I had my secret burning inside that I'm actually a convert and I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't want anybody to dismiss me. But how am I going to learn all this? But I just made lists and lists of words at that time in Hebrew, just trying to acquire the Hebrew that I needed to get around in Israel. And through the texts, there were not very many translations at the time. This was pre-Art Scroll, so I used the Silverman. I think it was the Silverman Chumash, right? That's what had the Rashi in it, and the Birnbaum Siddur. That's what there was, and then slowly acquiring words and making lists, and yeah, and then through different communities, moving into the modern Orthodox community, the Zionistic community, the Dati Leumi community, into the B'nai Akiva community as I joined the army, which that's not words that you use in English, but just acquiring the language and even the plays on words. I love plays on words. So for instance, one time when I was in the army, something was right in front of me that I didn't see, or right in front of somebody else they didn't see. And they said, Oznaim lahem v'lo ra'u einayim. No, einaim lahem v'lo ra'u oznaim. That's what it is. They have eyes, but they don't see their ears. Right? So that's a quote from a psalm. It's they have eyes, but they don't see. They have ears, but they don't hear. But they put it together. They have eyes, but they don't see their ears. Right? That's right in front of you, and you don't even see it. So I love like little quotes like that. Or like in English, in American, in Jewish, we say, when we give somebody a little reproof for not speaking ill of the dead, we don't say don't speak ill of the dead. We say acharei mot kadoshim amor. And we just list those three parshiot in order, like it's the name of three different parshas in the Torah, but it's after the dead. They're holy, we say. So it's just a quick, like little, like, don't say something not nice about a dead person. You just say it like that. So I love learning those kinds of things.
Yeah, I agree. It's the references are so rich, and you get that both in Israel and in, religious communities in the US and around the world.
Right.
Okay, so in my research about Baalei Tshuva, which also included some converts, I found two different trends in how people approached the culture that they encountered in their new Orthodox communities: hyper accommodation and deliberate distinctiveness. Hyper accommodation is when they adopt the new culture wholeheartedly, and sometimes even more than the people who grew up from, those who are FFB or from birth. And then deliberate distinctiveness is people who don't want to adopt the culture fully. They want to maintain their sense of distinctiveness as a Baal Tshuva or a convert. And so they don't adopt all the linguistic features, or they intentionally say things differently. Which of those do you think you were in, if either?
That's so interesting. I see that as a spectrum. I would say that distinctive differentness is what I would call the Ivri energy, right? That other siderness, which is the first aspect of being Jewish, is to be an Ivri. And the convert specifically needs a very strong Ivri energy, the ability to tear themselves away from and be distinctive and different, and then move to be able to move into the Jewish world. And the Baal Tshuva also has that strong Ivri energy. And then let's just say, once they get out of the mikvah, they have to figure out how to move into the Yisrael energy, into the I'm now part of the Jewish people energy. And there can be conflict between the joining and the distinctiveness. And we all have both. We need both. But so that's an interesting thing to think through. So I would say I'm not a hyper accommodator, and I am not a distinctive differencer in terms of language. In terms of language, I'm definitely a learn, explore, and I delight in language. So I love learning the new phrases or the new accents or however you might pronounce something. I do enjoy that. And I like to be able to code switch and speak the right language in the right community. So I would say it's more not the hyper accommodator, but the code switcher and the capacity for that. I enjoy that.
Okay, yeah. And there are certainly people who are, that you can't tell that they didn't grow up from by the way they talk. And you're probably in that category, right? Because you also embraced it at such a young age.
Right. So I do feel like, in a way, I grew up from, because since I started at 14, I adulted from. So I never, for instance, had a kitchen that wasn't kosher. I never like had my own money for my own wardrobe that wasn't a tznius wardrobe. I never made my own decisions as an adult that were outside of halacha. I was always striving to be on a halachic path. So I grew up that way. And for a long time, I didn't even see myself as a convert because of that. It really wasn't until my 30s that I realized, oh yeah, I'm such a convert. because I do have this whole background, all this, like all the transgenerational trauma that Jews bring to their Judaism and their Jewish experience, I don't have. So, but it took me a long time to really understand that being Jewish is so much more than what you do and how you think. There's so much about how you feel about it all. And that's very different inside the Jew by birth and the Jew by choice. So, or what I prefer, rather than Jew by choice, because so many Jews by birth will say, I'm a Jew by choice. I could have chosen that. I'm a Jew by choice. So I prefer first generation Jew.
Oh, I
And
love that.
and that helped me a lot, because as my kids made their own choices about their pathways, and some have chosen halachic pathways and some have chosen less than halachic pathways, and that was so difficult for me. I realized that everybody gets to make their own choices first, which I did. It turns out that I heard in the name of the Boston Rebbe that the greatest gift God gave to mankind is free will. And unfortunately, he gave it to our children as well.
Yes.
So, but the point is, I see in my husband's family, it took several generations to become not religious. And why should I think it should take only one generation to become, yes, religious? It's a multi-generational process. And as a first generation Jew, you jump in 2 feet, so like swimming in the deep end and trying to make it work. And I made it work, and hoping that my children would just follow along. And I realized, actually, this is a multi-generational process. Why should I think that they're going to follow me just because I jumped? And they also get to make their own choices. So first generation helped me understand that I wasn't a failure in those who are not following the halachic pathway, that it's a multi-generational process. So we'll see where their kids go. We'll see where their grandkids go. And we're in it for the very long haul, it turns out.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty common from communities today, to have families who have people who've taken very different paths.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that expression, first generation Jew. Have you used it and popularized it in your community?
I do introduce it in conversations because I feel like that's such a nice way to own. Like, nobody wants to be called a convert once they converted, even though 2 of the 613 mitzvot are to love the convert extra and to not bother the convert more. So you do kind of have to know who's who so you can keep that mitzvah. But still, it feels very diminishing once you've made it. Like, maybe the convert then is the one who's made the decision before they got to the mikvah. So they're in that stage of converting. But once they get out of the mikvah, we're supposed to treat them like 100% one of us, except they can't be a king or have svara. There's all kinds of different things. A king has to be a melech v'lo malka mikerav amecha, right? A male king, not a female queen, from the midst of your people. Cannot be a convert. You have to be naturally born to be a king. And so it's interesting that we do hold a distinction. Are you one of us or not? And I think it's a question throughout the life of the convert that they are confronted with. Like, people love to hear the story, but then they also like, you're either super cute. Maybe I should, like, in your paradigm of the difference or the over accommodating, I feel like there's maybe also paradigms of how converts are viewed. Like, either there's like the suspicion, like, how much could you really know? I mean, you're just a convert after all. Or there's the, oh my gosh, you're so amazing, you chose to be like me. So there's that like spectrum too. But after there's, you're so amazing, you chose to be like me, let me hear your story, then there often moves into the, but you're kind of weird. Even if they don't say it, there's still the like, me. I mean, I've been told many times, maybe don't share that you're a convert, just because it does take away from somebody's gravitas as a Torah teacher. So
And what's your response when people say that?
I hear. I accept cultural guidance from people. And I have seen that there's so many different communities to move within that cultural guidance is necessary for everybody. I dress differently than in Denver than in New York. It used to be that you could tell who's from where by how they dressed. You can't so much. Like, social media and Mishpacha magazine have become like a great equalizer in think about Mishpacha magazine as social media, in that sense that it has equalized the country. How we dress is very similar now since that. Probably also since Amazon that you can order things now. It's different. You don't have to just dress from the local stores, but there is a universal look to the different camps of Judaism now. You can pick it out in the airport. Who's who and what's what? Where are they from? What does it look like? Where are they from hashkafically, philosophically, not where are they from geographically?
Yeah. Can you give us some examples of head coverings or dresses or length of?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's how buttoned up are you on the top? Like, are you modern Orthodox? You're covering your cleavage, but maybe not your collarbones. Do you have a wider neck here? Like, do you cover like right up to your neckline? Like, I have a shell underneath this sweater to speak for the extra 3/4 of an inch on each side. The top is high enough, but the sides are not. So, so there's those little subtleties on how close you are there. Some people only wear collars, a buttoned collar. So if they have a shell, it will be a buttoned collar shell under their sweater, the only collars. And that's a Lakewoody look, but you don't have to be that way to be accepted in the firm world. But if you want to have that like extra, like a Lakewood principal look, yeah, you have to have a collar with a button all the time. Then there's sleeve length. Can you be 3/4 sleeves? Of course, it has to cover your elbows, reaching or not reaching. Like, so it's not just elbow length, but it's like mid length, but some people won't do that. They only want to the wrist. So what does that look like? Stockings, how thick should they be? Can they just be stockings? Can they be knee highs, or do you really need all the way up? Who knows? Anyway, if you're wearing a skirt that always covers your knees sitting or standing, and yet it's a standard. So, and then there's the shoes. Should they be open toe, or is that considered risque? Can they be sling back or not? Do you wear loafers? How high a heel and how pointy should it be? Nail polish for sure. What colors? Ballet pink only? Clear? Should it be bright? Should it be not bright? Can you have different things on your nails? Shaitel length. Can it be past your shoulders? This is possibly too long. Some people will take on as a segula. Let's say they're waiting for their daughter to get engaged or whatever. Like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut my shaitel because it's too long. If I will increase my tznius, perhaps that will create this chus for my daughter to get married. So short shaitels, long shaitels. How long a shaitel? What does it look like? Should it be lace front? Controversial. Should it be a natural part? Used to be controversial, now accepted. Should it be natural fiber? Artificial fiber? Pretty much everybody today is wearing real hair, but what kind of front should it be is the controversy. And some people say, well, I'm just not ready to take on not wearing my lace front. I'm like, lace fronts only came into the world like what, 7-8 years ago? It's not a take on, but all of that, like there's so much cultural reading in all the different things about what it looks like. How stylish are you? Is your shaitel monotoned or is it highlighted? Etc.
That's amazing. And so you've told us about women's dress and hair. What about men? Can you also tell, based on the way a man is dressed, what
100%.
he comes from?
100%. I mean, you can tell the more modern Orthodox, shorter kind of beard, or the Chabad type of beard, the untrimmed, the Chabad twist and tuck, or there's different types of Hasidus. The way the pious are they pious or pious? Right, but how do they look? And certainly, I don't know, I can't read all the different Hasiduses. I can tell certainly Hasidic, but which one, if I would be so clear in that world, I'd know if you're Bells or if you're Babov or whatever by the hat. But like I know that I think Babov and Ger have the spudik and not the shtreimel. So there's that type of hat. Shtreimels, you can hardly tell if it's a shtreimel still today because they brush it up now. It's almost as high as a spudik. And then the women, what the women are wearing, is it a spitzel? Is it a shaitel? Is it a shaitel with a band or not? And is the band just a headband or a band with a little fluffy thing in the back? Or is it a hat on top? Like how, is it real hair in the front or is it just a horsehair in the front? All the different communities. And then, so that's the women. And the men, you can tell like by there's a coolness factor. Who has what, like inside their jacket, is it the paisley kind of lining or is it just the blue lining? Of course, the shotness tag there. If you're actually though wealthy, you don't need a shotness tag because you had your suit custom made. So of course it didn't even need to be checked for shotness. You had it made by somebody who does it right. And then the different clothing, yeah, you can tell the different clothes, black and white for sure for the men. And I love, it's hysterical for me to see people black and white dressing men with button-down white shirts try to go incognito sometimes by wearing a collared shirt or a striped shirt. And I've worked with rabbis on campuses who did that. They thought, like, I'm going to fit in. I won't wear my yeshiva look. I'll wear a collared shirt. I'm like, how about a polo shirt? Which even that wouldn't fit in. It doesn't make them fit in on a college campus. They need a t-shirt, right? So
Wait, aren't their shirts normally collared?
colored, I said.
Oh, you said colored. Okay, got
Colored,
it. So,
C-O-U-L, right.
oh, okay.
Right.
So like a blue or green or
A
something.
blue, right? That's not yeshivish. A blue shirt is like, some people would like faint if their husband or son walked in wearing a blue shirt. Like,
Yeah.
so that
Okay.
does signify more modern, a blue shirt.
Yeah. So what about you? How do you define yourself hashkafically?
I would say my preference is shomeret mitzvot. When people try to box me into somewhere, I would say probably Haredi eclectic. But I don't like Haredi because Haredi in America and Israel are so different, and it's confusing. In Israel, I wouldn't probably be Haredi. I mean, I wouldn't be labeled as that. But there's an eclectic. So Anglo-Haredi is a word in Israel that could be used to modify and lighten the Haredi. I would say classically Orthodox. I'll put myself in classically Orthodox, which is nobody's box, but that's how I would describe it. I'm classically Orthodox, definitely Orthodox. But really, my own would be pre-denominationally Orthodox. I'm a
What
pre-denominational Orthodox Jew.
What do you mean by?
Pre-denominational Jew, before there was Orthodox, because that's a denomination. We in the Jewish world actually only divide by Shomer Shabbos and not Shomer Shabbos. So I'm Shomer Shabbos, but I'm a pre-denominational Jew. Yeah.
Well, when you say only divide by Shomer Shabbos and not, what do you mean?
In the classic Jewish world, 150 years ago and before Reform, before that, the Jewish world divided Jews by Shomer Shabbos and not Shomer Shabbos. And I guess there would be other streams, let's say the Sadducees and Pharisees. You could make a division there, right? So then it would be, at that time, the division was, do you hold by the oral law or not by the oral law? So there have been breakaway branches, but our general communal language is about Shomer Shabbos. Are you in the sign keeping club? Are you a sign keeper? That really Shabbos is the sign that you're in, that you're conscientiously observing, conscientiously connecting with Torah and mitzvot. Is Shomer Shabbos.
Okay, let's turn now to more about language. So you mentioned how you learned language by making lists, and did you ask people or did you have dictionaries that you looked up words in?
I certainly looked up Hebrew words. I have my Alkali, my trusty old yellow paged Alkali dictionary. I have an Evan Shushan nice big Hebrew dictionary now, which is so nice that I can use that. But I have my Alkali Hebrew, English, Hebrew, and I realized it's old, it's ossified. As the pages are yellow, so is the language. So I have tried to get some more modern Hebrew English dictionaries over the course of time and visits to Israel, just to see the new words that are coming in. And I pick up things, as I listen. I listen in Hebrew. My listening Hebrew is stronger than my spoken Hebrew, so I try to pick up Hebrew that way. And I'm sure you heard there's a great song, Ivrit Chadashah. So there's all kinds of words there that you could hear in the new Hebrew, which are mostly English words that have been Hebraicized. So there's that. So that's for the Hebrew part. But for the Jewish part, I learned a lot. I spent 6 summers in the bungalows, the Shar Yashuv bungalows, and I picked up a lot of language there. And one of the things.
Sorry, what is that?
What is the Shar Yashuv bungalows? So Shar Yashuv is just brand name. That's related to the yeshiva, Shar Yashuv in New York. And the bungalows are the Catskills communities that people went to I guess they were started back in the pre-air conditioning days when people needed to escape, back in the days when people slept on the fire escape outside to escape the heat of their Brooklyn apartments. Those who could afford it went up to the Catskills. And there's a whole summer life in the Catskills of many different ethnicities, but certainly a lot of Jews, Orthodox and non in the early days. But we, anyway, spent 6 summers in the Shar Yeshuv bungalow colony, which was probably built in the teens, and held together by the grace of God and some duct tape and since then. So it is not an upscale place, but was very grounding, and it was really a doorway into a whole different world for me. I sent my daughters to the Shar Yeshuv girls' school at the time called Tapenu, and I would say I became acculturated into the American Haredi world through Tehila Yeager, Reverend Tehila Yeager. So I sent my girls to that school, and her father founded the Shar Yeshuv Yeshiva, Rav Shlomo Freifeld, Lava Shalom, and that was the bungalow colony of the Freifelds and the Yeagers and their family members and community members. So we went there for one experimental summer. I loved it. So we went every summer thereafter for 6 years total. Rented out our house in Long Beach to Upper West Siders, who, like attorneys' families who wanted to come to the beach for the summer. And then we would take our kids up to the Catskills for the summer. So in the Catskills, I learned a lot of Jewish language. And that's also where I learned that in that culture, it's required to speak a Jewish language. So who are we speaking English here? Oh, but they said, this is why those two schools actually taught a lot of Yiddish, certainly the boys' school. So I did not send my kids to the boys' school because they teach into Yiddish, right? They translate into Yiddish and then into Hebrew. So I learned the word teach.
Wait, they teach into Yiddish and then Hebrew? Isn't it the Hebrew text that they're teaching into Yiddish?
Yeah, so it's interesting. They teach the Hebrew into Yiddish and then into maybe modern Hebrew. I'm not sure how the boys' school did it. The girls' school did it by teaching into spoken Hebrew and then into English. So they would say, like, for instance, and there's a sing-song about the teaching, Kolisha warning if anybody cares, but they would say, Lech lecha, lech la'atzmecha, go to yourself. That's how they would teach that. So that would be considered teaching, but it would be the 3 stages: saying the text, saying the modern, because they taught Lashon HaKodesh and they taught it in Ivrit in the school where my daughter went. Ivris, they taught it in Ivris, not Ivrit because that's Zionistic, but Ivris but they wanted the Ivris.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, the question was, if you're supposed to speak a Jewish language, and clearly you are, because we were redeemed from Egypt after all, because we maintained our language. So the women there wondered aloud, how then are we to speak English? But they agreed that if we speak an English that's so Judaicized that one must shift their language to speak to a non-Jew, then you are speaking a Jewish language. And I realized, yes, we do have to change our language to speak to somebody who doesn't speak a Jewish language, Jew or non-Jew. But if they don't, yes, we have to translate everything, or translate in our minds before we come out with a word or even a phrase. To say I'm sleeping by somebody's house, like, you don't sleep by, you sleep at, right? But that's the way you speak in that kind of culture. So if it needs to be translated, it's Jewish. So I learned a lot of Jewish words there, a lot.
Absolutely. And that's something that I use when people ask, is there really a Jewish English? I say, well, there are movies that have subtitles and they're not translating Yiddish or Hebrew, they're translating Jewish English. So yes, it's a different language. And where do you draw the line between language and dialect? It's, a question that we can debate. But tell us more about your experiences learning language. Did you ever have an experience where you said a word incorrectly and got corrected, or other adventures with language like that?
Interesting. I'm sure that I have. One word that I try to teach people right away so they can fit in better is Torah. And I spell it out for them, TOE.RAH, Torah. If you say Torah, you're like right away branding yourself as members of certain communities. So if you want to blend in the community like that they're seeking to blend in, if they're one of my students, then I spell it out for them, Torah, to say it that way. And it's fascinating to hear, even though I like to share that the center of Torah is or, which you can't hear if you pronounce it this way. You need to pronounce it the Torah way to hear the or in the middle of the Torah. But anyway, I'm sure I've been corrected, but I can't remember an uncomfortable correction in general. I could tell you one embarrassing story, but it's not about me. It's about my mother and how much she embarrassed me trying to fit in when she, in my process of conversion, when I was probably 15, I had sort of a Jewish guide, a Jewish mother at the time, Bernice Lynch, such a sweet woman who took such nice care of me in the conservative congregation that I was a part of at the time. She was a part of, and I tagged along with her. And then she invited my mother and sister for Friday night dinner along with me. I went to her house every week. So she invited my mother and my sister, that they should like see a little bit into my journey, which I was taking without them. So my mother said something about, she came and she wanted to use a Yiddish word. It's so embarrassing. So she referred to her two daughters and said, and these two little schmucks, it was so embarrassing. I was like, oh, why did I accept this invitation with my mother?
That's hilarious.
Schnooks, but even that wouldn't have been appropriate. But like, that's not what she said. So yeah.
Well, since you converted at such a young age and were integrated into Orthodox communities at such a young age, you didn't have the same experience that people who become from in their 30s and 40s or later have, where they really have to consciously learn the language and make a lot of mistakes. And so your experiences were different.
Yes. And that's why I do feel like inside, like I grew up Jewish. I adulted Jewish. So I was still in that language acquisition phase, right? As a teenager, you're still really acquiring the sophisticated language of your life. So, I mean, and that's why I'll say, like, I speak Hebrew fluently, but I speak it like a fourth grader. Like, it's not sophisticated. I didn't grow up in my Hebrew expression, but I can speak about anything. It just doesn't sound like an adult. But, you know, as that teenager is acquiring adult language, adult phrases, adult literary references, etc. So in that acquisition phase, yes, I was acquiring Jewish language as well at that time. So I don't think I'm particularly adept at language, even though I really love it. But it was hard to learn Hebrew, and I've had Spanish on my wish list for a while, and it's not filtering in.
So tell us about your experience creating the Yinglish dictionary.
Okay, so the dictionary that I created really at first was a service to those who visited our tape library at the Jewish Experience, where I was an educator. And I learned so much through tapes, of course, through one-on-one teaching and books that I read. And, you know, there was a time when I had read most of the books in English that were about Judaism. That was before the explosion of Jewish books in the 90s. But I'd say until the early 90s, I had read like a lot of what was available. And I subscribed to different tapes. So there was tape subscriptions at the time from Rabbi Tauber from Shalhevet or Rabbi Beryl Wine. So I would get tapes in the mail. Rabbi Raymond Beda had a lot of tapes that I'd borrow from our shul. So lots of tape learning, Rabbis Tursky, etc. And then when we moved to Denver, Colorado, I became a paid teacher rather than just a local community guide and teacher. So a professional teacher of adults. And part of my job was to organize the tape library, which I organized and would recommend tapes and books. I would feel like I'm a pharmacist dispensing, like, what do you need? Tell me what you're interested in. I'll tell you the book to read, the tapes to listen to, etc. But with tape dispensing, I always needed to assess their language first. How many words do you know? Which tapes can I recommend to you? Books are different because they have the translations or the glossaries, but tapes did not. So I thought, you know what I should do? I should make a glossary for the tape library. So that way, no matter what amount of Hebrew you know, you could still listen to any one of these. It doesn't have to just be Rabbi Tovia Singer, God bless him, who says everything in English and translates every word, but hardly anybody else does. So I made a tape glossary. That was my first thing to do. And then it was a fun project, and it just kept going and going. And I kept hearing more and more words, not just what you need to borrow a tape, but what do you need to sit in a shear? What do you need to sit in this shear? What do you need? Why, if you might need to know that shear is different than she, the same thing as she or pronounced in summer camps as share for some reason. But you might want to know that that's all the same word, and to start putting that into it so that there could be a language acquisition piece to it as well.
And for our listeners, she or shear or share mean lecture, right?
Yeah, or lesson. It means lesson, really.
Lesson.
Yeah, a lesson.
So the tapes that you were lending out, did you listen to them and write down the words as you were listening?
Yes, I did. I collected a lot of words that way, and then I collected words in the different shiurim that I went to, the different lectures and classes that I went to, and then I brought it with me for conferences. And I would just listen to, let's say, the AJOP conference, the Association of Jewish Outreach Professionals. So at their keynote lectures, when people would get up and speak, I had my lexicon with me, and I would write down the new words that I would hear, like how they use it in English. I would write it down. I wasn't trying to create another Hebrew English dictionary. I wanted, what are the words that we use in Jewish speech in this country, that Jewish language? So the Jewish language of the bungalow colonies, the ones we'd have to translate from, that's what I was trying to collect.
And how many entries do you have now?
Well, I haven't worked on it. I noticed since when I looked it up because of this podcast, it says 2011 on it. So it's been a project that I set down. And it'd be lovely if it someday got worked on again. But how many entries? I think there's 1,500 entries. That's what it says on the front of the book right here. So, but one thing that I like about it, because I have taught classes for people who are becoming acculturated, whether they're Baalei Tshuva or Gerim, and how to acquire, is I do have the tables of what to say when. On certain occasions, like when you see somebody who's pregnant, you don't say Mazel Tov, you say B'Sha'a Tova. Or holidays, like what are the greetings? You say a Guten Moed, or that's for the intermediate days of the holiday. You don't say Chag Sameach for the intermediate days. You say Guten Moed, or you would say Moedim LaSimcha if you're saying it in Hebrew. And if you say Moedim LaSimcha, the response is Chagim Uzmanim LaSason. So you just would know, like, what are you saying, where, and what place, how to say it.
And in that section of the dictionary, do you also distinguish between different from communities? Like some from communities probably wouldn't say Chagim Uzmanim L'Sason, right?
Right. So, excuse me, I don't think I've gotten that far. I mean, I haven't yet. One thing I liked when I looked up your online dictionary, first of all, it's so nice that it's a wiki available so people can add in, and that you can then record. You have a feature to record and hear the pronunciation. So I like that very much. And then you can choose the community that's applicable to. So I liked that also. And I wonder if you can sort it. It would be interesting to see if, I don't know if your dictionary, you could probably sort it from the back end. I don't know if we from the front end could sort. What are all the words I'd need to know if I was trying to speak in this community?
Yes, you can, but we don't have as fine-grained distinctions within the from world as, yeshivish modern versus modern Orthodox machmir. We don't have that distinction, that level of distinction, but we do distinguish between different ancestral groups, Ashkenazi, Jews from Uzbekistan, Bukharian Jews, Jews from Middle Eastern countries. So, but yes, on the homepage of we're talking about the Jewish English lexicon. On the homepage, you can sort by the types of people who use it, or also by the language of origin.
That's so
And
interesting.
we will add the entries from your lexicon that are not yet in our dictionary, and we'll note in the notes that they are from you, from your dictionary.
I added in a few, but I think the most important one that I added in was kalamadal. That was a clear missing word that you had there that just needed to be there. The rest were more whimsical.
Kalamadal, tell us about that.
Kalamadal. A kalamadal, a kala, of course, is a bride. A maidal is a young girl or a maid. Maidlach is plural, like you would say the maidlach. You might even say, like, who's coming over for Shabbos afternoon? The maidlach show up and they all want their fruit by the foot, or whatever it is, the little girls. But a kala maidal is a medium girl. She's still called a girl until she's married. Even if she's 30, she's a girl, sadly. So that kind of distinction is not there or available anywhere to put. But a kala maidal is somebody who is finished with her basic Jewish education, meaning she's finished with high school and or seminary if she chooses to go to seminary. But once she's done with this or that, and until she's married, unless it takes a very, very long time, she's a kalamadel. And she might even be a kalamadel from slightly before she finishes high school, meaning a kalamadel is somebody that is getting ready for marriage, a young woman who's getting ready for marriage, which means she has to start now thinking about who she'll marry, but also a lot about what she looks like in public, because everybody's thinking about her. Who do they want to read her to? Who do they want to suggest her to? And how does she look? And all those nuances in clothing make a difference. You know, in high school, she may have worn a ponytail, but now it's time to wear her hair down, possibly with a headband, not too long. But, and what kind of makeup she's wearing, it makes a difference. Like that's the type of people will judge you by how you look. And then they're starting to think about your matches, your shidduchim. So that's what a kalamadel is. Yeah.
Amazing. So, and I love how you use the word red, which our listeners might not know that it means to make a match, right? To establish a match, but literally to say.
It means to say. Yeah. It means to suggest a match.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To suggest a match. Yeah. So to say it out loud, to read a shidduch is to say a match or to suggest the possibility. Yeah.
So all of these words that you're talking about and that you included in your dictionary are heritage words. They're words that are passed down the generations from parent to child, but that are also passed to communities through educational institutions and to newcomers, converts, first generation Jews, and Balei Tshuva through educational institutions, especially outreach organizations that you're very involved with. So what's your advice for outreach professionals about helping to socialize newcomers to this language?
That's a great question. And I think I would have two answers. One is to actually teach a class, teach the language. And then by teaching it, first of all, you're giving a dose, but second of all, you're making yourself available as a language resource. You're letting people know you could ask a word, I'm available for that. And I have some answers. That's number one. But number two is the advice that I got from Talia Yeager after I spoke to somebody who was a relatively new Baal Tshuva. And it was like, for me, it was an embarrassing conversation to listen to her when she told me she was newly Lubavitch. I was trying to invite her for a meal, and she told me she only eats Hasidic shlita. That's their minyan. And I knew she meant Hasidic shchita, that's her minhag. But she misused two words in an embarrassing way for her. But I couldn't tell her that because it would have made her even more embarrassed. And I didn't know what to do about that.
Can you just explain the mistakes?
Yeah. So she said, I only eat Hasidic shlita. Shlita is the appellation used after the name of a rabbi to mean he should live long and be well. So you would say Rabbi, whatever it is, Rabbi Pen or Shlita, right? So you say that after, but Shchita means ritual slaughter, and it's a type of, there would certainly be different brands of slaughter that you would go by, or different validating kosher authorities that would say that one's okay. And she was saying she only eats meat that's been slaughtered in accordance with Hasidic standards. But she said it wrong. And then she said that's her minhag, her, how do you say minhag? Her tradition or her behavior. In this case, because she didn't have tradition really, because she was a new Baal Tshuva. But that's the behavior she's chosen to take on as a tradition, because minhag is how you behave in something. So, which often comes from a sense of tradition, but Balei Tshuva have to pick somebody else's minhag, or they pick a mishmash of minhagin. Anyway, so I spoke to Talia Yeager about it. I knew this person, I cared about this person, but I didn't want to embarrass her by correcting her language, but I didn't want her to walk around uncorrected. It's like it's like seeing something in somebody's teeth when they smile and you don't know, say it or don't say it. Like the real friend says it, because you don't want your friend to walk around with a seed stuck between their teeth while they're smiling, but it's still embarrassing to say it to them, for them. So I asked her, how do I do that? And she said, you should be like Naomi in the book of Ruth, who, when Ruth comes to her and tells her about her experience in Boaz's field, when Boaz has told Ruth, anytime, my daughter, come and harvest after the women in the field, acharei na'arotai, then, and she goes back to Naomi and says, he told me come anytime and harvest after the more inclusive male gendered, after the youths in the field. And Naomi just in a sentence said, that's right. Anytime go back and harvest after the young women in the field. She made it more exclusively feminine. So she said, just reuse the word in a sentence after they've said it and use it correctly. So, so that's also a way to not embarrass somebody, but to give them the language in a correct way.
Yes, in my book, I refer to that as embedded corrections.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is pretty common for outreach professionals to correct people in that more respectful way rather than saying, you said that wrong.
Right. So,
okay, well, we're almost out of time, but before I let you go, I have to ask you about your pets and their names.
So we only have one Jewishly named pet. That's our current one, Goldie, who we like to joke that she's named after Golda Meir, and she probably is because she is a Zionist. As a dog, she's white and she wears a blue collar, but really it came from, she actually came with that name and we tried to change it. And then we decided to embrace it. And then our kids gave us flack for naming another pet after her color because we had already had Honey and Ginger and Rusty. And so was this just another Goldie after her color? And we took umbrage, of course, saying, of course, we wouldn't name our dog after their color. Each one has their unique name. She's named Goldie after Golda Meir. So, but then we took on the story that she is named after Golda Meir. So that's why she has the blue bow. But yeah, it's weird to name a pet actually a name that you would call a human being. And it does bother some people whose name is Goldie, who come to our house, or children whose name is Goldie. So some people like it and some people are bothered by it. So I think the general custom of those who would allow themselves a pet in the community that we're in is to not use a human name. Nevertheless, Goldie is named Goldie, and she's a delight for us. She's our oxytocin fountain. She keeps us.
Well, that's really interesting because I know in the Orthodox world, dogs are much less common than outside of the Orthodox world. And but that's interesting what you said about human names, because human names are the most common type of names for dogs and for pets in general, but especially for dogs in America today. It wasn't always like that. That's a new trend since the 80s, going along with people seeing their pets as part of their family. But when I look at the Jewish names of pets for my other research project on that, I find that the most common category, even among the names that people consider Jewish, is human names like Goldie, but also all sorts of biblical names and names of historical figures. Golda Meir is actually one of the most common historical figures, especially for cats. There's a few Golda Meows.
That's so cute.
Yeah, and chickens, Goldie the chicken, but sometimes that isn't based on Golda Meir, but Goldie from Fiddler on the Roof.
That's interesting. Well, we call Goldie, since she is Jewish, she's Goldilocks. That's her middle name, but it's L-O-X, of course. So Goldilocks, yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. I find the human names a little disconcerting, but I like the Jewish names like Mazel or Afi for Afikomen. Rabbi Stamford's dog was Afi for Afikomen. So, and that's how I learned the word Afikomen, was trying to understand the name of their dog, Afi.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of how naming your pet with a Jewish name is an opportunity for education.
Yeah, it is.
Amazing. Yeah. Aliza Bulow, thank you so much. This was a very interesting and rich conversation, and I just appreciate all that you do and the time that you've spent with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I love hearing your research and the way that you framed things. It's so nice to speak to somebody who's in academics. It's so different than the way I absorb and share things, but it's so nice to hear your framework, and I appreciate the research that you're doing. Thank you. I may continue to have success, and and enhance the Jewish world through all that you're doing.
Likewise. Take care. Thank you. Heritage Words is a partnership of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Language Project and HUC Connect, supported by tax-deductible donations from listeners like you. I'm the producer and host, Sarah Bunin Benor. Kyle Elbaz Fingerhut is assistant producer, Avishay Artsy is editor, and Talia Ehrenberg is video editor. The music is from Maurice El Medioni's French and Algerian Arabic album Café Oran, featuring the Klezmatics David Krakauer and Frank London, courtesy of Piranha Records. This podcast is one of the many ways the Jewish Language Project raises awareness about the diversity of the Jewish people and the phenomenon of heritage words. We also have online crowdsourced dictionaries where you can find the words mentioned on the podcast. We post Jewish Word of the Week and fun facts on social media, and we offer free educational materials and exhibits that you can visit online or display in a synagogue, museum, or community center. Contact us about our live taping opportunities. Looking for gifts for Shabbat dinners and Passover seders? Check out our whimsical multilingual t-shirts, tote bags, stickers, and aprons. You can find all this content and donate, volunteer, or sign up for our email list at jewishlanguages.org. Thank you, merci mucho, soch boshi, rahmat, shukran, toda rabah, ashenim dank.